I'm very pleased today to rise and speak in strong support of Bill C-473, an act to amend the Financial Administration Act to provide balanced representation. I commend my colleague, the member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles, for her very hard work on this very important initiative. First, I want to discuss what this bill is designed to accomplish, Mr. Speaker, and then I want to address some of the arguments that may be aligned against it. I'm deeply indebted, I want to say at the outset, to a constituent, Ms. Nancy Singh, who has been a tireless researcher and really passionate advocate for this very issue. Her analysis has been very helpful to the presentation I'm going to make today. Bill C-473 aims to achieve gender parity in representation on the boards of directors of Crown corporations, but to do so over a period of 6 years. It's a gradual, phased-in initiative. It will also, of course, have the effect of indirectly forcing Crown corporations to widen their search for qualified, high-caliber applicants and target non-traditional recruitment pools. What this bill, Mr. Speaker, does not do is in any way legislate measures for companies, private sector corporate entities, financial institutions, or the like. But we do believe, as an NDP opposition, that taking steps to gender equity on government corporations will set an example so desperately needed in the private sector to achieve balanced representation in the management of our important industries. And really, quite frankly, mirror the demographic makeup of our very country. Canada is in fact one of the few Western countries with no policy or legislation on women's representation on corporate boards. And therefore we're depriving ourselves of the talent that women will provide to decision making. Most experts who have studied corporate governance have concluded that this is indeed a positive contribution that should be made. There are obviously enough women qualified to serve in these capacities. I taught for many years at a law school, and year after year, women were in the majority of those applicants. And of course, that composition has been achieved or is being achieved in many of our provincial superior courts. But on corporate boards, indeed in the Crown corporations of Canada, that has not been the case, as I will say in a moment. The Toronto Star reported in March about a report that was called Get on Board Corporate Canada, written by the Deputy Chief Economist of the TD Bank, Ms. Beata Caranci. And she said this, that nearly half the companies listed on the TSX Composite Index have only one female board member, and just over a quarter have no women on their board. This is why an example must be set, Mr. Speaker. And she said, based on a widely accepted international measure that's termed the GMI index, just 13.1% of corporate board seats in Canada were held by women in 2011, a figure that actually dropped from 6th to 9th place among industrialized nations over a 3-year period. In other words, it's getting worse, not better, Mr. Speaker. There is no strategy at all, no cohesive government policy to address this issue. Many have talked about a policy called where you would explain and then if you can't comply, explain why not. That's been the latest option in some of the private sector. But as has been pointed out by no less than the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan, this voluntary measure is having little or no impact. And that's why they asked recently the Ontario Securities Commission to require all public companies to have at least 3 women on their board. It's not tokenism, it's a requirement that they recognize to achieve better decisions on boards, reflecting the diversity of this country. So we have a more holistic view of the environment in which these corporations act. It is no different, Mr. Speaker, in Crown corporations. So we've had since 2008 at least 9 countries around the world, Norway, Spain, France, and Italy, that have some sort of quota representation requiring diversity on corporate boards. Other countries have set targets. What has Canada done, Mr. Speaker? Nothing. In 2012, the EU Justice Commissioner announced that European countries will be forced to hire a female candidate over an equally qualified male or face sanctions unless women occupy at least 40% of board seats in Europe by 2020. Other countries are getting serious about this problem. What is Canada doing? Nothing. So what about Crown corporations? Most recent data shows that among the 2,000 Canadians who hold positions in more than 200 Crown corporations, agencies, boards, and commissions across this country, women are currently underrepresented. They hold only 27% of senior management positions. The Library of Parliament tells us, according to the list of directors of Crown corporations, out of 84 Crown corporations in Canada, only 16 of those 84 presidents are women, 19%. Women are over 50%, of course, of our population. Quebec has done something. Quebec is the only province that's passed legislation to attain gender parity on the boards of their Crown corporations. The goal was to do so by 2011. Well, what's happened in that period of time? Well, the results have been impressive. In December 2011, which was the deadline to have achieved parity, 141 women and 128 men held positions on the boards of 22 state-owned enterprises in Quebec. Therefore, women have become a majority of board members. The task now is to balance representation in each board of state-owned enterprises covered by the legislation. It can be done. It's being done in other European countries. It's been done in Quebec. It can be done at the federal level. So with that said, what is the problem? Why would people be opposed to this, if indeed there are any people who are opposed? Well, let me suggest that there are probably three arguments. The first might be that appointments to a board must be based solely on merit. We agree. But there are so many women with the very credentials and skills needed that are not being brought forward that we have a problem. There are qualified people. And that's been, of course, proven elsewhere. The second argument is that this somehow is a quota system, even a temporary one, and it imposes a rigid straitjacket on the appointment process. I, too, find the word quota an ugly word, and in Canada, it has an ugly connotation and ugly history. But we must work to ensure opportunities for women and girls coming forward. The government has to show leadership. I believe that introducing a quota is a last resort, but the status quo is not working. It simply is not working. This must be a function of what is termed effects discrimination. You can't look at these statistics I've quoted, Mr. Speaker, without coming to a different conclusion. Now, an anecdote would be presented. Many people, including a woman named Guylaine Saucier, has been a very prominent director on Canadian corporate boards. And she's on the board of, or was on the board of the French food giant Danone. When France argued for, or at least announced it was creating a quota requiring corporate boards to have at least 40% women directors, she was an opponent initially. But Ms. Saucier then has come around to an entirely different view. In the Globe and Mail it was reported, "I'm beginning to evolve," she confesses. Yes, the appointed some token women, no doubt about it, but at the same time I do see coming on board women that really were not known and are really good. And I'm sure I can bet you that they would never have been invited to boards without the legislation. I'm more pleasantly surprised than I thought I would be. Close quote. The third argument is, I presume, that the law is not necessary. It is necessary. The Quebec example obviously demonstrates that the opposite is true. A selection process can remain very simple, and a corrective measure like imposing quotas balances the representation on boards within a realistic time frame. And women are ready to participate in the administration of large corporations, and certainly are more than ready to participate in large Canadian Crown corporations. It is proven, I think, that the simple passage of time doesn't translate into a significant increase on women, of women on boards. We've tried, but nothing has occurred. Nothing meaningful has occurred. It's time for action. It's time for Canada to join with its European counterparts, to join with the province of Quebec, and to get into the 21st century to show the kind of diversity that we desperately need in our boards. I strongly support this initiative and hope my fellow members of Parliament will do so as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat, l'honorable député.